Hello, Queensland storyteller. I'm Kim Dodsworth. The joys of growing up, as told by Gavin Casey in his story, When I Was a Kid. It's all here. When I was a kid, there was a girl in our town who used to make me blush and turn dumb just by talking to me. Her name was Judy Black. She was older than me, of course, because when you're a kid, girls anywhere near your own age aren't girls at all, but just brats. I wouldn't have given tuppence for any girl in this town except this one, and what I felt about her was my secret. She was a singing teacher, and I dare say she was pretty modern for those times, though it didn't seem to worry anyone much, because she had a knack of being sweet to the old ladies and the small fry and the old men, as well as the young chaps. But a few years passed, and I finished with school and went to work, and Judy Black went away too, to sing and teach singing in the city. And before long, all that was left of her in my mind was a pretty vague impression of what a young woman ought to be. And by that time, I was in the stage when almost any girl, even the ones that were a long way from what I thought girls ought to be, could make me blush and go dumb. My cobbers reckoned I was an ass in that respect, and were pretty right. But every now and again, one of them would have another go at jolting some life into me and giving me another chance. One day when I was supposed to be on a message somewhere, I was at Dylan's warehouse, yarning with Chook Martin, and either because it suited him or because he felt particularly friendly, he decided to give me a bit of a go. We were in the yard staring at his boss's car and talking about cars for a start, but the conversation drifted to girls. "I got to meet with young Dolly Crawford tonight," he said. "I'm doing all right with her. She'd have a cobber," she said. "You ought to come along, Johnny." "Oh," I said, feeling eager but nervous, as I always did. "I don't go much on girls." "Well, you're a goat," said Chook. "I know Dolly's cobber too, and there are a couple of bonzer tarts. We could have some fun. You want to kid 'em a bit. You want to string 'em along like I do. How do you ever expect to have any fun if you stand and scowl at 'em like you?" "Oh, I'll come if you're so keen," I said, as if I was doing it only as a favour to him. At tea that night, I ate as much as usual, but I shoved it into me a bit absent-mindedly. I climbed into my best grey slacks, and I polished my boots and hair, and had a good look at myself in the mirror, and felt fairly satisfied, though pretty nervous, by the time I went off to meet Chook. By 8:30, we were waiting in the darkness under the trees outside the night school building for the girls. "Hello, Chook," said Dolly. "Been waiting long?" Her cobber hung back in the shadows, and I wondered if it would be better or worse for me if she was shy too. "Come on, Clary," Dolly called out. The girl and myself came on bashfully, and we were all introduced. Her name, Dolly said, was Clarissa, and she had to be called Clary for short. I mumbled something, and what I saw of the girl in the shadows looked good and made me more terrified than ever. I shifted so that the shade of a pepper tree fell over my face and tried to look stern and sophisticated, and wondered if my hair was all right and wished that the palms of my hands didn't perspire so. But though I'd skited about what I was going to do, I didn't do it. After we'd walked up and down the streets for half an hour, I felt pretty sick of myself. I'd talked and talked and talked until I was dry of talk, and even then my talk didn't seem to have been of the right kind. I couldn't even make Clary laugh, though I was always good enough at making my cobbers chuckle, and ahead of me all the time I could see Chook and Dolly getting along like a house afire. They were sharing the same shadow, and every now and again Chook's silly bray of laughter or Dolly's giggles came back at us. Clary was pretty silent, and I knew it was all up with me. If I'd managed to interest her in what I'd said, I might have got as far as putting my arm around her waist early in the piece, and everything might have been all right. I was jealous of Chook and sick of myself, and I began to feel narked with her. I'd have liked to have turned around and stamped off home, but I had to go through with it somehow. "Gosh," I said, just to make some sort of conversation after what seemed like about 10 minutes of silence. "Chook and Dolly have got a pair of funny laughs, haven't they?" "Your friend Chook might have," said Clary stiffly. "I'm sure Dolly hasn't." I was pretty sick of her, and though I'd been feeling fed up with Chook too, I didn't like the way she spoke. "Well, if you ask me, Hers wins for a nasty noise, I said. But I suppose poor old Chook's sounds pretty crook to you after Snaky Regan's. Who told you I ever had anything to do with Snaky Regan? She asked. I wouldn't touch Snaky Regan with a 40-foot pole. No, I said very sarcastically. You wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't. What about the last railway picnic? I only went with Dolly, said Clary vigorously. I've never seen him since. Oh, no, I said. No, she snapped, in a proper temper. I wouldn't be seen dead with Snaky Regan. Cecil Brown's my boy. That made me laugh. Girly Brownie, I said triumphantly. Struth! Chook wouldn't bring him tonight. He's a sissy. He's not a sissy, said Clary. You don't even know Cecil Brown. He wouldn't have anything to do with your sort. I don't know Cecil Brown, I snorted. Cripes, I've known him since he was knee-high to a duck. You ask your precious Cecil Brown if him and me didn't used to both go to Thompson's place years ago, before they went to the coast to live. Cecil wouldn't go to silly old Thompson's, said Clary, pretty loftily. That was too much for me. I remembered Thompson's place with a good deal of affection. Wouldn't he? I pretty near yelled. Anybody'd go to Thompson's, and be pleased to. There were some bonzer people used to go to Thompson's. The Conways from the mine, and Ted Ewing that's teller in the Inland Bank now. And Judy Black, the singing teacher, used to be there pretty near every second night. Judy Black was my trump card. I remembered her suddenly, and she compared pretty favourably with the juvenile, scraggy flapper I was arguing with. I waited for Clary to show signs of being crushed, but Clary's lip curled. Pooh, she said. Judy Black? Well, that was enough to keep decent people away. What? I roared. You never even knew Judy Black. Gosh, I'd like to see you beside Judy Black. I laughed as scornfully as I could, but Clary looked superior and stubborn. Well, you won't, she said distantly, 'cause Judy Black's dead, see? That was a shock, and for a minute I felt sick. When you're a kid, it's generally old people that die, and as far as my experience went, nobody like Judy Black had died. Oh, I said, trying to convince myself, she ain't dead. Cripes, she was a real healthy girl, Judy was. I saw her a day or two before she went to the coast, and she was as well as I am. She's dead anyway, said Clary. What happened to her then, if you know so much? I asked. Did she have an accident? It was a sort of an accident, if you'd like to put it that way, said Clary. And it wasn't a very nice sort of accident to happen to a girl either. She giggled, and I suddenly felt a long way out of my depth. I felt sick and frightened. I looked at Clary through the dark, hating her for what she'd told me, and for the manner in which she told it. What was it? I asked with some sort of slim hope that there might be some possible explanation other than what I was thinking. You know, said Clary, giggling again. Don't be silly. I knew all right, and it made me sore and afraid to think of it. I wanted to get away from everyone, to be on my own, but most of all, I wanted to get away from Clary, and I wanted to hurt her before I did, for Judy Black's sake. But I couldn't think of any words to use for the purpose. I was too upset, I suppose. Anyway, all I did was walk fast until we'd caught up with Chook and Dolly, and then keep up a wrathful silence until we'd got rid of the girls. Cripes, said Chook, when we were walking home together. What did you do to Clary? You certainly had her wild. She's a dirty little bitch, I said. Chook looked amazed. But what the hell did you do? He asked again. I couldn't answer Chook, but I had to give him some sort of a reply, and though it made me feel lower than ever, I did it the easiest way. Oh, maybe I got a bit too fresh, I mumbled. She's a stupid sort of tart anyway. Gosh, said Chook, looking at me admiringly. By the look of her face, you won't be taking her out again anyway. I didn't want to take any girls out again. We tramped towards our homes, and I suppose it wasn't long before Chook began to wonder why it was I still had nothing to say. For perhaps a fortnight, I dodged people and gloomed over it all till my parents decided I was sickening for something, and my boss nearly gave me the sack. Then I ran into Chook, and I had a fight with him. Some sort of a mangled report of what had really happened had got back to him, of course, through Dolly, and he said something about Judy Black and myself. So I punched him on the nose, and we made quite a mess of each other, because we were getting big and heavy enough to really hurt when we hit. But when I fought Chook, it wasn't really for Judy Black or anything like that. It was for myself, because I was ashamed and felt a fool. And a punch on the nose was the only answer I could think of. That was When I Was a Kid by Gavin Casey. See you next week, I hope. I'm Kim Dosworth.